Hello, welcome. Let's continue reading our tales of the soul's conquest of evil. We're indeed at the part of the four romances of the King Arthur cycle, focusing on the knight Gawain, the third and final episode about knight Gawain. This is a captivating and fascinating story that, according to Zimmer, has its oldest version in a historically significant 16th century poem, a manuscript from the 16th century, titled The Marriage of Sir Gawain and Lady RAGNELL. It is, in fact, a poem. All of this was written in verse. He even transcribes parts of this verse in the book. And it seems to have undergone various other interpretations, several other versions throughout history. As is the case with things in the King Arthur myth, it's very difficult for a story to have only one version, sometimes with even significant differences. But this is the oldest source. It is said that on one occasion, King Arthur went out hunting with his knights. And when he went out hunting, he only took a bow and arrow to bring down the prey, and a machete to process the game and bring it home. He wasn't armed for a battle, and while chasing a deer, he significantly distanced himself from his knights. He was left alone, and when he manages to bring down the animal and goes to process his game, he is confronted. A great man, a great knight, great in the sense of physical stature, strong. He said that he finally had an opportunity to take revenge on King Arthur for an insult he had suffered from the king. Later, we will learn that it was some lands that belonged to him, that had been, for some reason, expropriated by King Arthur and given to Gawain. So this man appears, and King Arthur had never seen him before. He didn't remember him. He asks, "What is your name?" He says Gromer Summer Jower. And he says he would take his revenge. He would kill King Arthur at that very moment. Arthur, almost instinctively, says, "This will be a dishonor for you. That you are armed for combat. I am completely unarmed. I am prepared for hunting, not for combat. If you do this, it will mark an unworthy death for your opponent." This is not befitting of a knight, and the man is startled by this, because it was indeed true what the king was saying. He says the following, "All right, I will give you an opportunity. You will return to your castle and seek the answer to a question. What do women desire most? You have 1 year to find an answer to this question. Whether you find it or not, you will come to this place just as you are today. In a year, dressed in hunter's clothes, with hunter's weapons, you will give me the answers you have obtained. If you find the correct answer, your life will be spared. If not, you will be killed here. This will be my opportunity." And the two part ways, with the knight very confident that King Arthur would never find the answer. He leaves very confident, while King Arthur is quite shaken, imagining what he could do to escape such a relentless fate. When he arrives, the first knight he encounters is his nephew, Gawain. He tells everything that happened. Gawain, quicker than a flash, says, "Look, that's not going to happen, King. We will set out, the two each in a different direction, asking everyone we meet. Each of us will compile all the answers we find. Everyone we cross paths with, we will ask, 'What do women desire most?' And, surely, after a long journey, we will have countless answers, and one of them will be correct. Don't be discouraged, this won't be difficult." And so it was done. Arthur agreed. He goes in one direction, Gawain in another, asking everyone they meet along the way what women desire most. And they jot down all the answers. After several months, they meet again, and Arthur shows himself a bit unsure. "Well, there are many answers here. Some said that what a woman desires most is to be swept off her feet by a passionate man. Others say that what they desire most is to be loved. In short, many answers. But is that really it? Did we find the answer?" And Arthur, still very much in doubt. He leaves, distances himself a bit, and rides into the forest, wondering if the answer sought by the knight could be found there. When, suddenly, he encounters a woman. riding a very handsome horse, but she herself a monster. He looks and even doubts whether she is a human being, because she a monstrous witch. Had huge teeth, like those of a boar, one turned downward, the other upward, the mouth full of bristles, the eyes, the nose, everything monstrous, everything deformed. She was like a beast. And this woman, who initially frightens him, asks, "Your Majesty, did you find the answer? The answer that will save your life?" He is a bit surprised. "Well, do you know this riddle?" "I know. And I also know that this notebook you and your nephew have been filling out doesn't have a single correct answer. The only person who knows the correct answer is me. So, will you tell me?" he asked. "But there's a price for that." "I'll tell you if you promise me the hand in marriage of your nephew Gawain. I want him to marry me." Arthur is shocked by such madness. Gawain was a knight whose hand was highly sought after in the kingdom. He was young, he was handsome, he was brave. He says, "Look, I can't make a commitment like that. I can't arrange a marriage for my nephew. I need to talk to him." The witch agrees. "All right, talk to him and come back here." Arthur looks for Gawain and finds him, tells him what happened. And the knight doesn't think twice in his nobility and love for his king. He says, "Certainly, you can make that commitment. If this woman saves your life, I will marry her." And so it is agreed. And Arthur returns, and the witch says, "If this answer doesn't save your life, I will forego the marriage pact." And she tells him what women desire most is sovereignty. The sovereignty to decide their own lives. Sovereignty to be able to write their own destinies. Sovereignty is the most desired gift by women. King Arthur takes this answer. He goes to meet the knight. It was already approaching the time, and arrives there and hands him the two notebooks. "Let's see what you have there, King." He hands over the two notebooks to him in the hope that the correct answer was in neither of them, and the pact with the witch wouldn't need to be fulfilled. The giant reads everything that's there. The great knight reads everything that was there and says, "You're lost. You've lost your life. There's nothing correct here." He says, "No, wait. I still have an answer." "What is your answer?" "What women desire most is sovereignty." And then the great knight becomes very angry, very furious, and says, "It must have been that damned witch RAGNELL who told you this. Damn her." And he storms off, furious for having lost the opportunity to take revenge on King Arthur. King Arthur returns very dejected, because he would have to fulfill his pact. He meets with the witch and says, "Now, then I have earned my right. I have saved your life. Now, I will accompany you to the kingdom, so that my marriage to the knight Gawain can take place." And King Arthur enters the kingdom accompanied by that horrendous witch. Everyone goes to their doors to watch, because she was terrifying and no one believed she could be a human being, so grotesque was her appearance. They set the wedding date, and, contrary to what Queen Guinevere suggests, the witch does not agree to a discreet wedding for a few people. She demands that a ceremony be held for many people, that the entire kingdom be invited, and so the wedding takes place, and the people terribly lament the fate of poor knight Gawain. And he, with all his nobility, fulfills what he had set out to do. He marries her. The two withdraw during the festivities. She behaves as if she were a beast, which embarrasses him even more. But then the two retire for the nuptials. Already lying in bed, Gawain turned towards the edge, trying to muster the courage for what he had to do. The witch speaks to him in a very gentle voice. "Knight, be gentle. Since you have agreed to marry me, fulfill your marital duties, at least give me a kiss." And Gawain says, "Yes, I will certainly do that and much more." He honored his word and would not go back on it. When he turns to her, he is greatly startled, because what was beside him was the most beautiful woman he had ever known in his entire life. A splendid young woman with golden hair. He says, "Who are you?" And she explains, I am a maiden who was bewitched by my own stepmother. Who turned me into that horrible creature? I had to be loved. I had to be wed by one of the best knights in the world so that I could return to my original form. And our marriage rescued me. Now, there's a detail. I cannot stay in this form all the time. So I show you, and you decide what is best for you. My husband, I can be beautiful like this during the day and monstrous at night. Or the opposite, I can be monstrous during the day and beautiful at night. This is your choice. What do you prefer? Gawain stops and thinks about the two alternatives, being with her at night, beautiful, or being with her during the day, beautiful, and says, "Look, I don't know what to decide. Both options have their disadvantages. I leave it to you to decide, my dear wife. Decide what you consider best." And she smiles and says, "Fortunately, my spell has been broken. Now I can be beautiful all the time because you gave me sovereignty and allowed me to make my own choices." And with that, the two become tremendously happy. The next day dawns, and noon arrives. And King Arthur is worried. Is Gawain still alive? Did he survive? Could the witch have poisoned my nephew? And he's worried because he doesn't come out of the bridal chamber, so he decides to knock on the door. He knocks on the door, asks if Gawain is there. "How are you? Are you alive?" And Gawain responds, "Soon, I'll open the door. I'm alive and happy." And then he comes to the door with his wife. Imagine Arthur's surprise when he sees, next to his nephew, a stunning lady with long golden hair, who had gained sovereignty for herself. And the two would now live happily ever after. This is a very interesting story with multiple meanings. It's evident that, when it comes to something from the myth of King Arthur, it couldn't be any different. One of the things we notice as the first element is, when we dedicate ourselves with commitment and love to any role. No matter how arduous or disgusting or repugnant it may seem, when we dedicate ourselves with heart to it, its most beautiful side is revealed. When we act out of duty and commit ourselves to what is our responsibility, even if we initially feel a strong aversion to it, when we fulfill it. With integrity, anything shows us its most beautiful side. And everything in the universe has a more beautiful side. A second thing we can notice is how much people, all the men and women who were interviewed, especially the women. Since we don't deeply understand what we're missing, what we truly desire, what would really be important for us. No woman in the kingdom was able to perceive what was the great void, the great lack, the great need that was in her life. And the great knight who opposes King Arthur knew this. No one knows themselves that well, to the point of knowing what brings them happiness. Don't you find that curious? This is very relevant today. In truth, if you ask yourself, what among the things I do makes me happiest? You won't know. At a certain point, you'll have to close your eyes and search for when in your life you were truly happy. And you'll realize that certain things you do, thinking they're fun, are just a mere mass-produced protocol. You do what everyone else does, follow a script appropriate for your age, but you do it because everyone else does and find no great satisfaction in it. In that. On one occasion, I had the experience of asking myself what made me the most happy. And when I closed my eyes and searched through my day, I found a moment that I would never have imagined would be it. A moment when I was working the soil, planting a little plant, a rose bush seedling. And I felt that it had been a moment of great fulfillment, but I wasn't even aware of when I was happy. Such massification. I followed certain leisure protocols that were simply another tedious, exhausting obligation for me, which didn't make me happy, but everyone did it. My friends went, and I ended up not knowing what truly entertained me or what was good for me. Such ignorance we have. Of ourselves, where have your thoughts wandered? Today, who could say what they thought throughout the day today? It was critical. It was morbid. Did you have a morbid focus on things? Did you see the worst in things? Notice that you have difficulty knowing. If at any moment your mind wandered there, we have a very superficial self-awareness. No woman in the kingdom knew that what completed her was sovereignty. Another very important element we can see in this is that it's not femininity, just in the sense of man and woman, masculine and feminine, but the masculine and feminine polarity within us. We are beings today, humanity, beings tremendously rationalist, and all this intuitive, symbolic, emotional part, all this aspect, which in the symbolism of masculine and feminine is more associated with the feminine in a certain way, was underestimated. It was diminished, silenced within us. So we gave sovereignty to reason. We are rationalists and materialists. But this feminine voice within us is fundamental. Without the feminine, the human being becomes dehumanized. Without the feminine, he is not capable of understanding the mystery of motherhood. Not just the motherhood of a human child, but motherhood, for example, of Mother Nature. He is indifferent to nature. He is incapable of perceiving the need for beauty. He does things very focused only on their utility, more on the utilitarian aspect than the aesthetic. Everything becomes very square, very simple, simplistic, superficial, merely utilitarian, when the feminine aspect within us is pruned away. And the world we live in, we can say, prunes. Men and women prune a lot within themselves. The feminine aspect, they do not give the feminine the sovereignty it deserves. Only reason holds sovereignty within us. And finally, we can notice, in relation to RAGNELL, how does she manage? Integrate that monster of hers within herself. She knows deeply, descends into the depths of her consciousness, perceives this monster, and is able to convert it into light. She manages to be luminous. Day and night. Understand this mystery of day and night. Day and night. For us, it's as if the conscious is the unconscious. The basements of consciousness, where our little monster RAGNELL lives, where we are selfish, where we are beastly, where we are purely instinctive, where we are vulgar. She has to descend to experience this monstrous side and conquer sovereignty to illuminate the basements of her consciousness, and then have light, both in her somatic, animalistic aspect, managing to tame all these forces, as well as in her luminous aspect. Daytime, conscious, she reconciles both worlds and has light in both. Self-knowledge, a bit of what the alchemists called the work in black. Descend into the basements of consciousness and cast light. To know who we are and transform our little monsters into luminous beings. To conquer light, night and day. So you realize there are many facets. Like everything in this book, all the stories have various facets through which we can see not just the idea of female sovereignty, which in itself holds value, but the sovereignty of all. Of everything in the universe, there is a feminine polarity. And that, in a very utilitarian moment, is relegated to a secondary plane. I hope you reflect on this. What I want to teach you is not to just see things, but to see through things. Through everything, you can perceive an idea. And this idea can have multiple applications in your life. Do not be limited by appearances. Life is symbolic. When we understand stories like this, we don't just understand stories. We begin to learn to speak the language of life. And we can understand our own story. I hope this is being an adventure of reflection. Fruitful for you, helping you to grow. And may it help you become a reference point for growth. Thank you much.